Good morning and welcome to the David and David on Real Estate podcast. Today is a milestone occasion for David Korman and I because we're actually doing our first in-person shoot and we're on episode 112 and we have a very special guest. We have Ross McCredie from McCredie Investments with us who just made a huge announcement. And Ross, I went on YouTube. I looked around for a lot of interviews and I couldn't really find any here in Canada. So very pleased to have you as a guest on the show. Welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, David and David. The reason you won't find much for the last sort of 10 years since I sold Sothebys in 2015, most of my work's been sort of in California or overseas. So one of the big cool things about acquiring Sutton was to do something in here in Canada. I live in Vancouver and half my time Vancouver and Whistler. So to acquire a national brokerage was a huge opportunity for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to congratulate him. So what we're talking about is he just finished completing the transaction to acquire Sutton Canada, right? The national company, the national brand. So congratulations, Ross. And we're going to hear more about this transaction, but I think we also got to get back to your whole history because it's really incredible. So back to Sothebys, even before that, your connection to real estate.
Yeah, obviously the weird thing is when you're doing a transaction like this, it was the first time I sat down and read my own bio. I haven't done that in a while. So I realized how old I was. So I just turned 57. That's kind of freaking me out sometimes. But, the thing about even my background has really been, I love what I do. I get up every day. I get pretty excited. Real estate's a unique business where you get to actually physically build things and be involved in the relationships that I've built in the industry, both here in Canada and around the world, has been pretty unique. What's actually kind of, as I've gotten older, I've really realized that Canadians tend to be some of the best marketers in the world of real estate. So I traveled all over the Middle East, traveled in Asia, and you meet Canadians everywhere you go. And especially in the US, Canadians are well known for their expertise in marketing real estate. So,
And what do you think that is?
I think Canadian cities evolved faster. The US cities, they were very suburban. And in Canada, especially in the GTA, where you've got such large immigration that's been coming in, about 80,000 people a year immigrate into the GTA in Toronto. And then you also have net migration of Canadians that are moving in urban centers. Well, and I would say the US has been probably 20, 25 years behind most of the Canadian cities.
So everybody in Canadian cities gravitates to the big cities as opposed to building up the more suburban communities?
Yeah, you've got so much more sprawl in the U.S. centers, and because of the infrastructure that they built with the freeways back in the U.S. 35, 40 years ago. If you look at the difference between Seattle, for instance, and Vancouver, Seattle has freeways running right through the downtown, and it's taking people out of the city. And Vancouver, we have no freeways. It's become gridlock, but people really, if you look at the densification in Vancouver, that started 35, 40 years ago. And it's been a good thing. We've done a really good job with our urban centers. I think Toronto, and specifically, has really evolved, especially in the last, I'd say, 15 years, where you're seeing that there really are great places to live downtown. And they're much more, I call them urban resorts now. They've got a lot more than just simply condos downtown. You've got a lot of good parks. You've got good thinking about how the planning was done. A lot of the Canadian planners are now helping plan cities all over the world. Like, for instance, in Dubai, most of the work that's been done in Dubai has actually been done by Canadian planners.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think Canadians really understand the importance of creating wealth through real estate as well. I think, there's a huge, significant number of Canadians that have created a lot of wealth through real estate. So I think, Canadians are really tied to real estate in that manner, and it's a lot more prevalent than in some of the other countries in the world.
Yeah, no, I again, if you go back to just the historical nature of Canadian cities and how we've had such large net migration from people from all over the world, it's really made people think and behave differently. And I think from my perspective, understanding who's actually part of your community and where they're coming from and celebrating that versus it's much more diverse. Whereas you go into some of these U.S. centers or different cities around the world, there is no densification in the way that there's no assimilation in the way there is certainly in Canada, I think, to the same degree.
So tell us more about your background and where did it all start for you in terms of real estate, and what were the steps that led you to where you are today?
Ironically, or it's not that funny of a story, but I was hit by a drunk driver on my bicycle in Whistler. And that was in 2000, year 2000, I guess. Broke my neck and broke my back, had a major head injury, and I just sold my travel companies. And so I was kind of, not, I wouldn't say retired, but kind of just taking some time off, had this accident. And then Joe Hussein, who was the founder of IntraWest, I knew him quite well. And he had said, hey, why don't you get back into the business world? And we really need someone to help us out in this real estate game. And at the time I kept saying, well, I don't know anything about real estate and I've got a head injury, so I'm not sure how good I'm going to be.
That makes you perfect for real estate, I think.
So, it was really interesting because I jumped right into as IntraWest as a developer. I went up to Panorama and I basically sold real estate for the first year for the developer. And it really opened my eyes. And fortunately, I'd been a buyer of real estate for a while, and specifically IntraWest real estate, both in Whistler and in different resorts around the world. So I really was intrigued with what the industry was doing, what specifically IntraWest was doing at the time. They had 36 resorts around the world. So I learned, I joke around that I got my PhD in real estate in a period of 4 years where I went from Panorama the first year, and then for 3.5 years I was in Whistler. And we sold over $800 million of real estate in Whistler.
Wow.
And we broke all sorts of records, both even internationally, where I think it was 2001, we sold the Four Seasons private residence. I sold 37 units in 40 minutes, average 1209 a square foot. So we're talking a long time ago.
Right.
And those numbers were 30 or 40% higher than anything had ever been achieved.
Wow.
In Canadian history. In fact, I think at that time, that was the first Four Seasons private residence they've ever done in the world. And now it's the standard where they're doing that all over the world now.
And you were involved in putting those deals together and selling those
Yeah,
units?
so I was director of sales at IntraWest in Whistler, ran that portfolio, had a sales team. And what was really cool was I was intimately involved in the actual product. So we really sat down with our existing clientele. And that really got me into the opportunity to think, there's got to be a better way to market and sell real estate, either as a developer, but more importantly, we were really involved with what the product ended up being. So the original concept, what was going to be a Four Seasons, what ended up being Four Seasons private residence and only 37 units, was originally going to be 80 condos, non-branded. But I had so much feedback from the existing clients that were coming to us saying, no, we want bigger units, we want the Four Seasons brand, and we want to actually spend, not as a hotel room, but we want to spend our time there. So I kept flying back and forth to Toronto trying to convince Four Seasons, the head office, that this was a real opportunity. So the first time we did it, we absolutely blew it out of the water. And so more importantly, it just really intrigued me. And then figuring out, well, how do I actually attract more international buyers into Whistler, specifically for that Four Seasons product? Because about half of our buyers were still local, but about half were international. We had a lot of buyers from Singapore and Hong Kong. And that really led me into thinking, well, geez, there's got to be a real opportunity to do this a little bit better.
It's all about listening to the client at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that was, I remember at the time, I'd never heard of a steam oven. So one of the things we did, we had a workshop where we brought in 20 potential buyers, and we sat down for a full day. We had the architects, we had the engineers, and we sat down and we had 20 potential homeowners, and they sat down and told us what they wanted.
What they would like.
And that's when the whole idea of a
And you
steam
gave it
oven.
to
And literally, even on that particular development, we didn't even have a website. We didn't even do a brochure. We basically sold off blueprints and some information, but it really was phenomenal to watch that experience where even at the time, even the price point was so high. And we realized that, it's just never been done before. But by having that experience and seeing that ultimately, and then people actually moving into those suites, and they're still some of the best performing product in Whistler to this day. So,
Not to mention the relationship that afforded you with Four Seasons and then, being part of that development process and learning the whole process from the inside out and listening to your consumer. And you're not really selling. You're just, at the end of the day, you're giving the consumer exactly what they want.
Yeah, and that led me into the other part of that was, as I was going through that process, the sales process when you went to most developers was very hardcore sales. It was like someone walks in there, they're hammering in on you. And one of the things we really changed was we really wanted to get to know who the people were that were coming in. We wanted to know more about them. and we wanted to develop longer term relationships because we'd realized at the time IntraWest had about 33,000 condos that they'd sold in over 36 resorts around the world. But I was blown away that there was no database, there was no information on these potential owners. So the first thing I started to do was to try and figure out, those buyers that were in Whistler, well, a lot of those people had done extremely well in Whistler with real estate investments. And so I realized, a lot of them might want to buy in Mammoth, they might want to buy in Sandestin, Florida. So we had these other resorts. So we started a pretty strong referral network. And that really led me into, as that was being developed in 2004, all of a sudden Sothebys came up as a potential opportunity. So I bought the rights to Canada in 2004. And the reason I did that was Sotheby's brand was a great brand. It was obviously been around since 1744. And I thought to have that as a brand across Canada would be a huge opportunity, not only for Canadians, but then to market Canadian real estate internationally. And that kind of led me into that process.
And it kind of follows the luxury or the high performance brand of the Four Seasons, which you've sat down with these people, you've intimately gotten to know them. You see that there's a lot of money coming in internationally into Canada, especially from Singapore, being in Vancouver. So it sounds like the perfect transition.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really loved about Four Seasons is that they did such a good job of marketing, but no superfluous adjectives, no BS, just tell it true, great imagery. The experience that you get at Four Seasons isn't so much about the building or the architecture, it's about the experience, it's about the people, it's about the bellman. And so when I started working with them intimately, and then when I acquired Sotheby's, I kept thinking, you know what, I really want to build a company that I'm super proud of and proud of the people, but I want to make sure that the experience people have when they engage anybody in our company, it's next level. And so that, that relationship that I had Four Seasons in Whistler, we ended up doing the Four Seasons in Toronto, and then I ended up working on a number of Four Seasons around the world. So it just, for me, it was a really natural, good fit in terms of, obviously, Four Seasons is a great experience. So if you ever get a chance to stay there, which I have a few times, so it really did, it just elevated exactly where I wanted to go in terms of the real estate offerings that I was going to be involved with.
So then you acquire Sotheby's Canada, but it's an existing brand, big, been around for a long time in the U.S. doing things a certain way. So what do you have in mind when you take over Canada? You continue it, or you're trying to take it to the next level, change it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we bought the rights to Canada, Sotheby's hadn't been in Canada. They had an affiliation with a brokerage here in Toronto, and they had one brokerage in Vancouver, but it was not actually, Sotheby's Canada did not exist before that. And even Sotheby's internationally, I was the first master franchise awarded by Sotheby's to an international marketplace. So there was no real playbook there. It wasn't like so we literally, I think I mentioned this earlier, but at the time it was my wife and I was sitting down, we purchased the right to Sotheby's, and I kind of said I had no idea what I was going to do with it. We opened our first office, and over the course of the next 12 years, we opened up nearly 40 offices across the country, and we owned and operated every office.
Wow.
So we didn't franchise.
So it was just you?
Yeah, and it was, as you would know, as a franchise owner yourself and partner, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of work, and you really got to do a good job. You've got to interview a lot of people. I mean, one of the things that we did do is we really made sure we brought the right people in, and we created a dynamic environment. But it took 12 years and a lot of interviews. I think we ended up with around 900 agents
across the country.
Yeah.
Like you're coast to coast with that, and that ran from what year till what year?
So I acquired, in 2004, we acquired the rights. We opened our first office, I think a month after I acquired that. And then basically sold, in 2015, I sold to Dundee Corporation. And we did that because I also had a couple other interests. I was involved with a company called Dundee 360, and we were building the Edgewater Casino, which now is called the Park Resort in downtown Vancouver. So that was kind of the reason I did that.
Yeah. So you built it up, sold it off in 2015. So now we got to fill in 2015 to 23.
Good word here.
You've been riding bikes since then?
No, so I mean, it was funny because I went from, I'll never forget the day after I exited Sotheby's and sold out, and I had to phone my wife because I had a brand new email address, and I said, can you send me an email? Because I went from 200-300 emails every day, 70, 80 calls, to all of a sudden just sitting there one day, and I opened up my new email address and there was no email there. So my wife sends me an email. So that, it was really quite it was quite the transition to go from the world that I've been in for 12 years and a lot of travel to all of a sudden that situation. And then I've actually picked up the phone. I'd read an article about Compass in New York, and there's the founder and CEO is Robert Refkin, and I phoned him up out of the blue. We talked for half an hour on the phone, and basically got on a flight 2 days later, went to New York, and I spent 6 months basically as an advisor to Compass in New York, and worked with their teams. And it was really interesting to see what they were doing, but they were being heavily criticized by everybody in the industry. And I kept thinking, you know what, someone should pay attention to this guy. Like he's a smart guy, he knows his stuff. He had the backing of some pretty key investors. And I thought, you know what, instead of just like a lot of the industry was saying, he's not going to do anything, he's going to waste money, he's never going to make it, I decided otherwise. And I remember at the time, some of the people that obviously a lot of my friends at Sothebys kept thinking, well, why would you work there? And I said, you know what, I don't know where they're going to go, but I think he is going to be part of the future real estate. And so I did that for about 6 months, and then realized, going back and forth to New York wasn't fun for my family. So a really good friend of mine, Patrick Barber, is the president of Pacific Union in San Francisco. And I phoned him up and we sat down and kind of figured out how I could be involved with Pacific Union, and San Francisco being a 2-hour flight from Vancouver was a lot easier. So then I spent the next 3 years there and helping them. We grew from the number 12 brokerage in America and the largest in Northern California. And then that company grew within a period of 16 months to the number 5 brokerage in America. And we acquired 9 other brokerages in Southern California. And that's when I picked up the phone and phoned Robert Refkin back at Compass and said, hey, we should put these 2 things together because we're the number 5. They were the number 6. It took quite a while, and about 11 months to conclude that deal, but we ended up creating what is now Compass, which is the largest brokerage in America. So a lot of the people that really said, Compass had kind of a difficult start like most brokerages do, but they are the player in the U.S. So.
And they're so technology heavy. They look at technology in a very different way than your traditional brokerage model. So, I like seeing disruptors and innovators in the space to see, how they're leveraging technology to enhance the customer experience.
Yeah.
Because I think the realtor is hard to replace, but I think there's a lot of tools to help realtors, really give a more meaningful customer experience to the end user there. And, I don't know much about Compass other than that, they're very technology heavy. But I'd love to learn more and then kind of see how they're using technology to change and influence that customer experience.
And it was interesting being there because they went from very much being a technology was their story. But if you look at Compass today, it's 500 offices. It's a bricks and mortars brokerage. 90% of the agents that work there, I don't think they're using all of the technologies they
So they pivoted.
So the adoption of technology in this industry is incredibly slow. And I think one of the things I think about all the time is when COVID hit, this entire industry changed because people had to adopt technology, and the real estate professionals realized, hey, I've got these tools that are available, and Compass has a lot of them, but a lot of the other brokerages have developed technologies, everything from CRM systems to data systems. But it really fast-tracked the adoption of technology was really through the COVID.
Yeah, if you physically can't go to see a house, you have a way to see it online now with incredible technology and room by room and everything. So it's, people still, I think, enjoy the experience of going and physically looking at a house, but you can do a lot of your background work and your homework and save a lot of the miles on it by seeing it that way. So that's just a simple thing that really got enhanced with COVID.
Yeah, you think of the appraisals. In the middle of COVID, when you couldn't have anybody come into your home, people were running around themselves with their iPhones, taking photos, uploading it. You had a lot of companies figure that out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So the whole concept, like where I live in Whistler, the house beside me sold to someone in Singapore, never visited the home. The homeowner did the photos themselves, and it was a fairly significant multi-million-dollar purchase. And it blew me away to think that, hey, someone was going to be able to do that in the function as using this pretty basic technology. It's nothing groundbreaking about what we're talking about, but it was really the adoption of that technology that's really started to, I think a lot of people, especially with AI now, people are starting to really think, well, what does this mean for real estate? And more importantly, for the real estate professionals. And the playbook here, I think, is financial services. So if you look at the early 90s when E-Trade came into North America, that stockbroker that existed was kind of worried, and they had to be worried. But the stockbroker didn't go away. The stockbroker that exists today really adopted technologies. They became more transparent. They completely evolved using those technologies to empower themselves, and they did transactions a lot faster, and their clients were better served. So I think that's actually happening right now in real estate.
Yes, and they can still use the technology with a greater expertise than the layman could do it with trying to do it at home on their computer, because it's just information gathering and the availability of information to them, and the expert is still the expert. They still can compare things better. They know what's going on, and they use the technology better than just someone sitting at home could do it. So I think that every industry, I think, is going through those type of changes these days.
Yeah, and I think especially in the legal world, when you think of how well empowered consumers are and homeowners are now. So, in typical fashion before, the homeowner was basically blind to a lot of things that are going on. Now with the engagement between the lawyer, the real estate professional, the homeowner is showing up and they have access to a lot of good information. It's really our job to make sure that they fully understand what to do with that information to make an informed, intelligent transaction. So I think the future of that is, especially from my perspective related to real estate agents and professionals that are involved in this and that will continue to be involved, they're going to have deep relationships with not only the homeowner, but the legal world, financing. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to bring all of the parties involved related to a transaction to work seamlessly together. And that's going to involve technology, it's going to involve data, but more importantly, it's going to involve smart people. Like if you want to be in this business for the long run, you're going to have to be pretty smart.
Yep, and I think every industry goes through that where people are like, well, you know what, you can be replaced by technology, and my profession's no different. At one point, you've done a lot of work in the U.S., and the U.S. is very much a title insurance type of system. And title insurance, when they first came to Canada, it was like a lot of lawyers were threatened. That's going to just eliminate the need for lawyers in real estate transactions. So 30 years later, we're still here. We're doing things differently than we did 30 years ago, but there's still a need. And at the same thing, the real estate agents, same thing with just about every different facet of the business. There's attempts to get rid of this technology, but really is we need technology and just you do it differently. But the expertise is still very valuable.
Yeah, and
I was just going to say, and that really added to the consumer experience, right? Because title insurance protects the consumer. So now if an issue does arise, even years later, the consumer is protected. So at the end of the day, that enhanced the consumer experience, not detracted from it. So it's a good evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think, people that have fought technology, it doesn't matter what industry. When you think about, for instance, when the internet came in and the travel agent was there, a lot of people thought the travel agent was going to be gone. Well, to be honest, it's never been a better time to own a travel agency, but those travel agents are smarter, they're empowered. The homeowner or the person who's buying the travel has way better informed. So I think the evolution is going to happen. I think the last industry is real estate and insurance are the two last industries where technology adoption has been so slow, especially in the legal profession. I mean, there's so many things that are happening so fast, but instead of being fearful of it or saying, hey, it's going to change my business model, it might, but at the end of the day, you still need people there to help and assist with one of the most important purchases you're ever going to make, and that's your home. Yeah. So I think instead of the adoption and people being worried about technology, I think they need to embrace it. And I think they do it in combination with other fiduciaries. Right?
Yeah, interesting. My wife happens to be in the travel business too. So, and I know that's your background. So the conversations we had so many years ago about they're going the way to the dodo bird. The only thing that's really changed with technology, even though people are Googling how to fly and book stuff on their own, she went from being a travel agent to a travel consultant. I think that was the biggest change in the way the terminology, because they still need the professional. They still need to consult, and anybody that's traveling, you get stuck somewhere, or a flight gets canceled, or your accommodation doesn't work, you really appreciate how you really need that travel agent or consultant behind you. Industry by industry, it's the same thing. We're not replaceable. Expertise is expertise, and I think it's the same thing in the real estate. No matter how much the technology advances, you still need a good real estate agent to close your transaction. You still need a real estate lawyer to close your transaction and protect you. You still need a travel consultant to get you from place to place.
I think the point that you just made there is that the evolution from a transactional person that's just taking an order and helping through that transaction the real estate professional of the future is going to become much more of a wealth management role, where they're sitting down with their existing client base and homeowners. They're continually working with them to develop a strategy related to their real estate. And to do that, you need to be intimately and deeply personal in terms of your knowledge of the assets.
Right.
So I think they go very much to an advisor and consultant role rather than just simply a transactional role.
Right.
I love that you said that. One of the other companies I'm involved with is called the Real Estate Investment Institute, REI. And we actually teach realtors and give them a certification of how to work with investors.
Yeah.
And the whole concept there is to, move them from a transaction facilitator to a consultant and add a lot more value to the individual client. It's about building those lifelong relationships. Investors are always looking for their next deal. They're not emotional. And if you can help, build that lifelong client, then your work as a realtor gets a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to me as watching this evolution, especially maybe coming from the outside, looking at real estate and how the real estate agent has performed and viewed both by the public and homeowners and even with developers. But that evolution, it's strange to me that it didn't happen sooner. Like, it really, when I started thinking back and I look at these different companies, and one of the big opportunities I see with Sutton is because we have 115 franchise partners across the country with 6,000 agents in some key markets, we have an opportunity to make those franchise owners and the brokers some of the smartest people in the industry.
100%.
And sure, technology is going to play a role in that, data is going to charge, but it's really going to be making sure that they're the best informed, the most connected people and professionals, and raise the bar in terms of the industry standards related to real estate data and information. Because one of the things that I keep looking at is Canada in particular, amongst all the G7 countries in the world, has some of the worst data related to real estate, especially compared to the US. I mean, if you're buying a home in the US, you can get a lot of good public information on that home. In Canada, you don't. So I really see us, Sutton Canada, becoming very instrumental in having a voice municipally, at the municipal level, provincial level, and at the federal level, so that the consumers are getting better information and they start thinking about real estate, not simply as a home, but as an asset class. So what do we do to inform people when they're making the purchase? And these are big purchases that are deeply personal. We'll make them with intelligent information, make sure that the transaction itself is very transparent, because it really hasn't been for a long time. And then the people that are on the transactional process, whether it's your lawyer, your accountant, your banker, all of those people and your accountant are working together, right? And so to do that, though, you need access to really intelligent people, right? And that's, I think, the future of this business.
Love it.
Yeah, and the efforts, both on a federal level and provincial level in Canada towards real estate, is consumer protection. And we've just been going through this with changes to the provincially with TRESA coming into play. And it's all based on consumer protection, having an informed consumer, make sure things are explained, not just disclosed to a consumer, but explained to the consumer and go through a process. And it's all part of raising the bar in the industry to a greater level of professionalism. And I'm surprised, as I've been on a bit of a tour lately, going around explaining this to different brokerages, how much pushback there is. But he's like, I don't want to do that. Like, leave me alone. I don't want to, have to send confirming emails and get acknowledgments and stuff. But no, you really should be doing that. That's part of your professionalism. That's how you become a better professional. So anything that you're going to propose, federally, provincially, municipally, that helps, that's sort of done on the basis it's consumer protection, so it's good for everybody, is going to be well received, I think, and it'll enhance the experience of everybody.
Yeah, I'm amazed every time when these things, including this latest initiative, the industry is not embracing it the way they should. And one of the things that I, as an observer, kind of stepping back for, like I've been for the last 10 years, I look at oftentimes as a homeowner, as a buyer of real estate, which I do quite a bit, I'd like to have a better experience. And a lot of times it's just, I can't get good information. The analogy I always think about was, if you look at the medical profession, I mean, now with the internet, you can get a lot of information, especially with AI. All of a sudden, all you have to do is Google whatever you think you've got your ailment is, you're going to get a lot of information. And a lot of it's not good information, right? And people are making bad decisions with bad information. Whereas, again, if you look at real estate, you can Google lots of information related to real estate. You can go on ChatGPT and look up different information. but it's not good information, right? At the end of the day, you've got to have someone disseminating the information. And that information is just one part of the equation. The other equation is the actual buyer of the real estate or the seller. So the real estate professional needs to deeply understand what the reason for a purchase or a sale, and do that in a way that is going to satisfy their need on a long-term basis. But you can't do that online. You've got to get into these relationships, and you have to be incredibly well empowered with good data, verified information, and transactional technologies that are going to allow you to do things faster.
And education is such a pillar in that relationship too, right? Because the realtor needs to be empowered with the right information and the right education to be able to have these conversations. I think wealth building and having that consultant's approach is going to be instrumental in creating a professional relationship with your clients. And you said it at the beginning of the podcast, like this is one of the biggest purchases of anybody's life. Yeah. To wing it or to have somebody who is a transaction taker facilitate that is a huge mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, again, the industry, if you look at the financial services business, what a stockbroker was doing in 1993 compared to what they do today, it's a completely different business. And that individual is completely different. But the other piece to this, when you start thinking about it, I mean, there's 4 million real estate agents in North America. 90% do a few transactions a year, and that's it.
Family and friends.
Yeah, so it's that kind of model, and I think that model's gone. I think the future of the industry is going to be less real estate professionals.
100%.
I think they'll be better served. I think homeowners will be better served. And to compete at the next level where we're going to be going in the industry, you're going to have a lot of data, technology, but you're going to have to be really good at what you do. And if you're not really good at what you're doing, I don't think people are going to be willing to pay the type of fees that are generated in commissions. So that model, which exists across North America, and it's pretty unique in North America, even title insurance. When you start thinking about title insurance, I remember I was buying a home in the US and I couldn't believe how much it cost. And I thought, well, wait a sec here, why do I have to pay $1,600? Can't I just go down to land title's office and check it myself? And the answer was, well, yeah, I guess you could. But I'm thinking, well, what did they do 30 years ago when we didn't have title insurance? Well, they would go to a lawyer. They'd go sit down, the lawyer would write a letter, send it to Wells Fargo. That seemed to satisfy everybody. Well, why are we, if you start to think about title insurance, you start thinking about appraisals, you start thinking about inspections, you look at all those transactional costs, not only the cost, but the time that it takes. I think the whole industry is going to start evolving. You're going to see companies like ANOW, for instance, out of Alberta, where they have an appraisal software platform that's taken appraisals from $600 and taking 10 days down to $300 and done in 2 days. And I think over the next year, you're going to see ANOW develop additional capabilities where they'll do an appraisal for $100 and done in 24 hours. So
using AI and
and
mathematics and
exactly. So and it's going to be that adoption from major banks, institutions, insurance companies, the real estate brokerage businesses that are going to lead that way. And I think for me personally, one of the main reasons I bought Sutton was the adoption, or sitting on the sidelines like I was. I thought this is a tremendous opportunity to jump in, grab an iconic brand that's been around for 41 years, had a unique history when it came out in the early 80s.
Yeah, it was an innovator.
Total innovator, and did some pretty powerful things. So I think, being part of that conversation in the Canadian real estate market was important to me. And I see that right now, that because of COVID, because of the adoption of these technologies, I think you can finally make a real dent in this industry. And I think Sutton will lead the way on that.
All right. Well, I got a question for you now, Ross. So I've gotten to know you really well in the last 45 minutes or so. So I think I've got some deep insight on you now. So you're not someone that's going to buy an existing company brand like Sutton Canada to just take it over and continue doing whatever they've been doing up until now. You've got something else in mind to do with it, to bring it to another level. Like, that's not a wild guess, I don't think, on my
on
my part.
I think you're pretty insightful there. But, I think what's really been really interesting the last couple months as I've gone through this process, I keep a pad of paper beside my bed, and I'm up every night writing stuff down. The more I got involved in the actual potential to purchase it, the more excited I got. But more importantly, it was a little unique because I didn't know what was, like I joked around, but I said to my wife, it was like I bought a barn and I didn't know what the contents were, right? So the good news is I got inside, I've met people like yourself, franchise owners, and there's, as I said, 115 of them across the country. It's been really enlightening, and there's some amazing people in Sutton. They operate their business at the local level incredibly well. I think the Sutton brand needs to be refreshed. So we've already started that process. And it's going to be in concert with our franchise partners, with our brokers, to understand what they liked about Sutton.
And what they need.
And what they need.
Right.
Right. So those, again, I think I love what I do, and I get super excited, and I'm a very competitive person. So, I think the opportunity to work with people like yourself and you and in the entire industry, I'm really looking forward. So I don't know all of the things that we're going to do, but, I more and more, like I was just in Montreal 2 days ago, and I met with our partners there. And what an amazing organization. Every one of the franchise partners was incredible. And the one thing to really remember related to real estate, all real estate is hyper local, right? So it's one thing to be a national brand, but if you're going to be successful, it's going to be making sure that boots on the ground, the people that do and run those businesses are actually serving that local market, because what happens in Vancouver is completely unique and different than what's happening here in Toronto. What happens in Collingwood is very different than what happens in Whistler. So it's going to be those people, but as a brand and as a company, if we can put as many tools in your toolbox, that's my role.
And it's bringing a new energy to something as well. We've talked over the years too. You've been a Sutton guy for a long time, but you've had all kinds of ideas of things that can be done to help you as a local business owner, right? And you've got to have someone to voice those to and get them to react and come up with even the next level ideas and stuff. So I'm excited for you, David, as this is a great opportunity for your business.
Yeah, and sitting down with Ross and hearing it firsthand was, a great to hear as well. And I agree with you. I think the future is information. I think Sutton has proved itself over the last 37 years that it's one of the top brands in Canada, and the future is bright indeed, especially with small micro adjustments. There can be a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that will be interesting from my perspective, and certainly what we'll do in Sutton, is we can move fast. I mean, I am, like I said, I'm pretty competitive. When I have an idea and I want to take that to our franchise partners and roll it out across the country, we'll do it faster than just about anybody. I've always operated very lean. I'm not a big org structure type person. I love what I do. I actually, like, one of the things I loved when I was with Sothebys, I went on listing presentations all the time. I'm looking forward to actually working with brokers, working with homeowners, sitting down and listening that the tools that we develop in Sutton actually perform and work. But again, even understanding how they're going to use these tools, it's going to be very unique in every single market. So one of the things that was really interesting, even with the Sutton brand, at first I thought, that logo's been around for a long time. We got to redo that. We got to do this. The more I got into it, I realized, well, there's a lot of value in that logo, in that brand, and what they've done. But it's, it's going to be refreshed. We're going to be developing a new website. It's already in the works as we speak. But I was really blown away with how strong that brand is in Canada and how well known it is. And so people like yourself that have carried that flag have done a remarkably good job. But I think more importantly, I think it's working together to say not only what is Sutton going to do, but I think we're going to have a voice in the Canadian real estate market to elevate the experience, to really help define what that real estate professional is of the future. And for me, that just gets me up in the morning, makes me want to go do what I want to do.
Yeah. I sat down with an indie brokerage and I asked them, I kind of had a conversation with them, and I asked them, I said, hey, if I ask, 10 people in the room, how many of these 10 people have heard of your brand, do you think? And the answer was 0. And then I asked them, well, if I ask the same 10 people in the room, how many of them have heard about Sutton? What do you think the answer is going to be? And, the wife looked at me and she said, well, probably everybody. I said, okay, interesting. And then, so this is in your local market. Yeah. I'm asking this question. Let's go to a different market. Let's go to a city that's, 50, 100, 200 kilometers away and do the same test, right? And consistently, everybody's going to know what Sutton is. Everybody's heard of the Sutton brand. And there's so much power in that. Because the other question I asked the wife is I said, listen, if I give you $40 million and I give you a national ad budget, how much do you think you're going to be able to influence so that if I go 200 kilometers away, people are going to know your local brand in that market? And the wife sat for a few minutes and then she looked at me and she's like, we're not going to make much of a dent nationally. I said, exactly. So how much is the Sutton brand worth? Right?
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because, again, it's the evolution and you've got teams that are coming in. Everybody's building up their own private brands, which is an important thing to do. Everybody should do that, especially the independent contractor nature of it. But more importantly, just like you said, it needs to mean something. If you're a Sutton agent, it should mean something. Because it will mean something to the homeowner. But, if you look at Tesla as a really good example, they have no ad budget. They spend no money on advertising. You know what they focused on? Is actually performing and giving people something that's unique and different. So one of the good news with Sutton is it is a known brand. It's been out there for a long time. But I think in order for us to expand, and I have very large, significant plans, I think we're going to triple the size of Sutton across Canada. There's a lot of markets that we're not in right now that we want to talk to potential new franchise partners. I think in order to be successful and grow that brand, it's going to be just looking for the best people out there. And if we do that really well, the expansion will come. And it'll be, at the end of the day, it's going to be homeowners are going to be better served because they're listing or selling their home through a Sutton agent. That's our goal. And again, being a uniquely Canadian brand rather than a US brand coming into Canada, I think it's a huge opportunity because there's really only 2 national Canadian brands. And I think Sutton's going to be a strong player.
Love it. So have you tapped into any of your previous connections and tapped anybody on the shoulder and said, hey, you're coming with me on this journey?
Yeah, there's been, I've developed some really strong relationships over the years across the industry. So I've been blown away with the number of emails, texts, and LinkedIn requests from people in the industry, both people that might have been with previous companies I'm involved with. A lot of developers have reached out to me to want to congratulate me and just be involved. And I think one of the things that the business I've always been involved in, we had a strong culture of performance, but having a lot of fun, right? So one of the things I know at the local level, each of the Sutton offices, they've done that incredibly well. I think the brand hasn't done a lot in the past, and I think one of the things we're going to do is define the culture of Sutton around professionalism, around business intelligence, about the future. But more importantly, it's having these deep personal relationships with everybody. So I think, and including our competitors, it's really making sure that everybody at all the other brands know who we are, we know who they are, and we work together. Because if we do that well, then the homeowners can be better served. I think, things like if there's new initiatives that are coming forward, consumer protection things, we want to do that too. But we should do that in concert with not only other brands in Canada, but the legal community, working with the banks, working with everybody. Because again, as an asset class, the evolution of managing and transacting real estate needs to perform at a higher level. Things are going to happen a lot faster, and there'll be a lot of pressure on costs. So we have to figure out how to do that, and at the same time, provide great service to our consumers.
Yeah, I love what I'm hearing so far. We've in this local provincial market, we've gone through an extended period of time with multi-offer type of transactions, and there's a whole generation of agents that have grown up in it. And something we talk about a lot of times when we meet with them is you have a role on the seller side. You got to qualify who your buyers are. You got a group of buyers they all each have an agent. So you want to do whatever you can to find out who's the best buyer. It's not best price offer. It's who's going to be able to close the deal and give you everything that you really need. So you got to qualify your buyer. But the other thing is you got to qualify the agent that's bringing that buyer too. Yeah. And I think when, from what I'm hearing from you is when people know, oh, this is a Sutton agent bringing this buyer, that's going to go ding, 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 ding to a potential seller saying, okay, I got a level of professionalism behind this brand that this agent's bringing to me. So that helps qualify. I want to deal with that agent instead of fly-by-night real estate agent from a different broker that doesn't have the technology and the professionalism and the support. So I think there's huge value in that because we're still going to be in a market periodically where there's more than one offer and you got to qualify. You want to deal with a professional on the other side of a transaction.
No, you're entirely right. And I think the homeowner, quite often when these multi-bid experience. So the homeowners are not well served through that process. And so I think it's really incumbent on the brands and the real estate professionals to start working better, listening to their homeowners, and figure out the best solution there. And I don't have all the answers there, but I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the public's well served. And I think the real estate professional is the quarterback of that transaction. And I think the future of that quarterback is in jeopardy right now. I think that real estate professional has to completely change the way they behave, the way they interact with homeowners, and the way they interact with other brokers for the best interests of the homeowner. And the ones that don't and fight it, I think they're going to be gone. I think in 10 years, I think when people look at this industry, 10 years from now, they won't recognize how we did things before. So for me to be part of that conversation and part of that process, I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's great. You're going to get rid of the part-timers and the fly-by-night brokerages and raise the bar. And I think that's great for everybody, and it's great for the profession. And the bottom line is the consumer is better protected that way, better informed, better experience. They're going to refer you to their friends and neighbors, and away you go, and get rid of some of the lower end of the profession, because it's a problem. I see it all the time. I got the same thing in my industry. I hate dealing with half the lawyers that are in our business. I don't want to close transactions with them. They make our life miserable because they're not doing it full time. I want to close with the guys that are running a business like we are, that are doing it all the time. They're in the trenches all the time, closing, experiencing all the different things that happen. Even though they're competitors, I want them to do well. I need them in the industry to make my job better and our mutual clients, the transaction better. So it just goes hand in hand.
And it simplifies everything.
Yep.
Well, especially this better than anyone. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science to be successful in this business. You have to work hard. You have to be really well informed. You have to have the ability to engage people with some charisma around what you do and building your own brand and building these relationships. But it's not easy. And that's why the vast majority of people that go into the industry, they don't last a couple of years. And so even with previous companies I've been involved with, we used to say, go work somewhere else for a while. When you've got 5 years experience and you actually know what you're doing, come talk to us. But because if you do survive 5 years, then you're probably going to survive in the business. And I think that's one of the things that the industry isn't doing well enough, because it's these illusions of grandeur that you can make a lot of money in real estate. Well, you can, but you can make a lot of money in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But the one trait that always, it doesn't matter if it's in real estate, whether it's in law, it doesn't matter what it is, you have to work, you have to put the time in. The concept of getting rich quick doesn't exist. Getting rich quick takes a long time, I like to say. So more importantly, at the end of the day, if you actually want to enjoy what you do and you want to add value to homeowners in the transactional process, then you have to perform at a very, very high level. And so it's hard to do with the existing model.
And everybody has a different definition of what the word rich actually means,
Yes.
right? And to me, rich is, what you take home at the end of the day, not what you make on a revenue slide. And I think that's where the Sutton broker owners have really done extremely well. And I've met a lot of these Sutton broker owners over the years, and there's some great operators that have done extremely well. They've purchased their real estate 15, 20 years ago. They've helped each other and made the right decisions collectively, where now they're in a great financial position, and they're winning on that net income point of view. Maybe they're not doing the best on the revenue side, but they run really successful, profitable businesses. And realtors need to start looking at their careers in the same way. They're entrepreneurs. They're running businesses, and they need to focus on not only the revenue side, but they need to focus on the net income side. So what that you make $1 million if you're spending $950,000 in marketing expenses? Yeah. Like that to me, that makes no sense. If you're making $1 million and you're keeping $900,000, I'm going to shake your hand and congratulate you. But a lot of the times that's not the case. And it's all about keeping up with the Joneses and having shiny things. And a lot of the times that doesn't add to your bottom line. It takes away from it.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to that is if you start thinking about just a macro point of view, Canadian real estate is going to continue to be some of the best asset class to own in the world. And you look at where Canada's position, that's also, having worked in California, worked in the US quite a bit and overseas, every time I come back to Vancouver, I'd fly into the city and I'd say, wow, I love living here. Obviously, same with Toronto. I mean, the airports are great, the infrastructure is great. Canada sits unique in the world right now in terms of one of the safest places in the world to live. So if you start to think about real estate as an asset class in Canada, that's a great place to start investing. And I think whether related to interest rates or whatever that's going to happen over the course of time, it is always going to be a story or an asset class that people are going to want to buy.
Yeah.
And especially again, with you look at net migration, you look at affordability issues and things that the pressure that's going to happen in Canada and is happening right now, we need way more housing. And so we want to be, again, part of that solution.
Yeah, and Canada has an attraction, just an immigration attraction, but it also has an investment attraction to the point that our federal government, in their wisdom, decided they have to put a foreign ban on, ban foreign buyers from buying residential real estate. How many countries has that happened in?
And it doesn't work. It actually makes it more expensive.
It doesn't work at all. But even to think that we got to ban foreign buyers, like no other country would even think in those terms. Like we should be attracting buyers.
But no, it's true. And I mean, for instance, New Zealand and Australia have looked at it and have done it in different fashions, but it never really, it never gets the goal. But what's always amazing to me when people are making these decisions, government agencies, the data they're relying and the thought that, like, for instance, in Vancouver where I live, everybody thinks it's foreign buyers. They're not. 95% of all the real estate that's being purchased in Vancouver right now is by Vancouverites,
right.
People that live there. In Whistler, for instance, 80% of all the real estate in Whistler is owned by people that live in the Lower Mainland. Then another 10% might be across the country, and there might be 10, 15% international or US. But it's not what people think it is, right? So, and that's where I think the government needs to be better informed by people like ourselves to say to them, listen, the problem here isn't foreign buyers. That very much is a myth. And then more importantly, I think issues related to, how are we attracting and dealing with our own population? How are we getting in the business that you and I are in? How do we get that next generation of real estate professionals working in this industry to better serve the needs of the Canadians? Well, it's because we're not doing a very good job right now to do that. And as you know, when you start looking around at people that are coming out of the universities, where do they want to work, right? And so my point was, if it's going to be in real estate, you want to make sure that those people are attracted to technology, data, information, and being extremely competitive in the marketplace. So I think that's actually happening in our business right now. A lot of the age demographic of a realtor is quite high, but now it's starting to drop for the first time in decades.
Yeah.
I think even when I bought Sothebys, I think the average age was 57 years old, actually, what I am now. So, God, I'm old. But anyway, so, I think now it's dropping down significantly. And I think people will start to being really attracted, again, if the industry can really elevate, right? Not only Sutton, but the entire industry starts to do it. But they do it in a cooperative way, working with, so one of the big jobs I have in front of me right now, and I'm already working with all the major players in the banking business, all the major players in the insurance business. We're going to have strategic relationships at every level, municipally, provincially, and federally, and with all the other major institutions as well.
Love that. Yeah. I think we need to attract the younger generation to the brand, right? I think if we can attract the younger generation and empower the younger generation, we're going to be very successful.
Well, for a long time, like the industry in general was attract people had a career and then they finished that career. They said, okay, now maybe I'll sell real estate because I can do it on a part-time basis but it doesn't work like that anymore. And I think what you have to do now is getting the guys right out of school, right out of high school, university, college programs or whatever, get right into real estate and show them that that's a great career path. And I'm speaking of someone who's got a son that chose that path right out of university. And, he went into real estate and he's thrived in it, but he embraces the technologies, he embraces all the modern things that a real estate agent's supposed to do and looking for the next level thing. And, and he's done tremendously well. I think that's what you guys have to do. It's not waiting for someone, I did 20 years working at this plant and I'm now, I got my pension, they retired me, now I'm going to go into real estate. I think those days are gone. You still get a little bit of that because you can get some exceptional people with business background and stuff sometimes, but I think you need the younger blood and show them what an attractive business it could be.
And I think from my own personal experience, I love what I'm doing, but I've actually been able to do it not only in Canada, but I've done it around the world. And so for me, it was just the industry became just this really fun thing to be involved with. And again, coming out of it with a head injury in 2000 was a little bit unique and different. But because I came in with wide open eyes and didn't really have a lot of perception of what I was going to do or how I was going to do things, but pretty much every day I got up and I did something a little bit better than I did the day before. And along the way, I made a lot of mistakes. But thankfully, I haven't really made the same mistake twice, right? So, as you evolve and you look at the industry, again, I look at this as a huge opportunity for myself and the industry and for Sutton and all the franchise owners to say, okay, well, what does the future look like? What do we do? But if we actually focus on the experience for the homeowner, I think we're going to win all day long. And to me, that transition that we're going through right now versus where it's been for the past 30, 40 years, it was very much that person where they said, oh, if I'm a real estate professional, they didn't really know what that meant, right? They said, well, what do you mean you sell a couple of homes, or is that what you do? No, I actually am a real estate professional. I get up every day and I serve my clients and I work very hard to do this. And I have a portfolio that I've worked on and here's what I do. People weren't thinking like that years ago. And as you know, for every successful broker that works for you, they've got a plan. They get up every day, they know exactly what they're going to do. And the real estate agent 10, 15 years ago, most of them woke up, they didn't know what they were going to do that day. Right. And that blew me away. I kept looking at people going, you get up every day and you don't even know what you're going to do? Like, it's like the old school where you go knock on doors or something and ask people that want to sell their home.
You hope that someone calls you.
Yeah.
And show me a property because you have no plan for the day.
Yeah, and I was always blown away. And sadly, I mean, a lot of transactions in our business come from death and divorce, right? So one of the horrible things you saw it in the legal profession as well, a lot of divorces happen through COVID. Luckily for Canadians, that actually happened while the real estate market went up quite a bit. So people actually, not only did they get divorced and end up with more money, they could afford to do that. If it had gone the other way, if the real estate market had gone down and we had through a lot of divorce, things wouldn't have been quite as rosy. So, but my point was the industry in the past has been a reactionary business. And in order to better serve clients' need, when it is something tragic like a death or a divorce or things like that, people are highly emotional and they're making bad decisions with bad data and some bad actors out there. So one of the things I really, really spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we make that transaction? How do we actually embrace homeowners? How do we start pre-arranging future transactions? How do you sit down with your clients every year and say, hey, what does your portfolio look like? What are your goals and aspirations? Yep. Hey, if you've got a place like, for instance, it's amazing how many Canadians that own property in the US have no idea what the ramifications are if you were to die or someone dies and you've got that property. Death taxes, and everybody goes on about how America is so much better for taxes. Well, it's not good for death taxes, I can tell you that, right? So, and vice versa, there's a lot of Americans that own property in Canada and they don't know the ramifications. So the real estate professional of the future needs to have deep relationships and a deep understanding of their clients' needs. And then they can find solutions. Because it's not, I say to people all the time, this is cooking with a wood stove. It's not microwave cooking. This is not formula based. It's not like, hey, you can do this, this, and this. And that's when people say, well, you can start buying and selling real estate on your phone. You don't need anybody. Well, try that. See what happens. It's not like a gold bar that you just buy and it's the same everywhere you go.
No. Real estate is and always will be your best investment. And it's amazing how many similarities and how many synergies there is between the Real Estate Investment Institute and this conversation, and that consultant's approach and adding more value to your client as you move through that relationship and creating that lifelong client. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds. We talked a little bit about the future of Canadian real estate, and I want to ask you about blockchain technology. Because it's something that I've been looking at, and I think a lot of people have been hearing a lot about. But how do you envision blockchain technology playing a role in the real estate market in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, it was, I'm going back and dating myself again, but about 7 years ago, I started reading up on blockchain, and it was not so much that I was interested in crypto. I really didn't. I'm not a buyer. I'm not a seller or a big proponent of crypto. Not saying one way or the other, but what I was really fascinated with was the ledger system and having a private ledger or a public ledger and providing transparency into transactions. So I engaged with a company called Axiom Zen. We created Crypto Kitties. And the Crypto Kitties concept using blockchain technology was really meant to mirror a real estate transaction. So we developed a system and process, and we created a company called Cornerstone. And Cornerstone, a key component to it is actually using blockchain. Dapper Labs created Flow, which is their own version of that. So we're exploring all sorts of areas where blockchain could actually help and facilitate transactions, providing more transparency and trust, because I think the two keys in the future of the transaction is going to be providing transparency on the transactional platform, providing trust so that consumers actually believe the data and information, verifying that information, and that's at the end of the day going to better experience in terms of the actual transaction itself. So back to the blockchain, a lot of people jumped on it and thought, well, you're going to be able to do transactions on blockchain. The problem is it's a public blockchain. So there's a lot of information related to real estate that is public for sure, but there's also a lot of information related to real estate that's private, and you want it to stay private. So, I think there's components so that we're going to be looking at and developing, utilizing blockchain, but it's going to be the marriage of other technologies, other data. But more importantly, it's verifying the data that we have on the chain and making sure connected to an asset like real estate that will facilitate a much more seamless and faster transaction in the future.
So do you ever envision the conveyance of real estate being embedded into a blockchain? One of the people that I know really well, John DeMichelle, he's the CEO of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. He's actually working on a project to be able to facilitate and do that. I was just wondering what your thoughts are and something like that.
Yeah, well, the key to all of those things is going to be the land titles offices, right? So in municipal offices across not only Canada, but across North America and around the world. In Dubai, they're actually using blockchain technology at the land titles office.
Really?
Yeah, to ensure that piece. So a blockchain on its own, certainly at the brokerage level, is one thing, but it won't ever really have the power of what it could do unless you don't coordinate with the land title offices.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a lot of conversations with municipalities across Canada to develop that type of technology. Again, one of the issues that you have related to blockchain is that it is public information. So depending on where that information is being put there, right? That's one of the problems you have with MLS boards. A lot of the information that's on the MLS is not verified, and you have issues there, right? So if people are making these decisions based on data coming from MLS feeds, and it's not accurate, you have a problem. Same's true of blockchain. So it really becomes, blockchain can be incredibly powerful as long as we're getting good verified information at the municipal level. And then I think that facilitation could actually happen. And I think those transactions will become faster and the consumers will be better served.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then you're going to have the provincial governments on side and adopting it and accepting, because they run the registry offices, and every province is done a little bit differently. So you're not going to get the federal government really involved because it's a provincial jurisdiction. So it could probably be done, but but it doesn't work unless the registry offices are adopting it and are able to do it. So, someone's got a lot of work to do to convince the provincial government.
Again, this industry is lagged behind. So the last 30, 40, 50 years, a lot of the land title information sat in a vanilla folder in a cabinet somewhere. Well, today, the digitization of data and information related to real estate is evolving quite quickly. So I think our role as Sutton Canada, we're going to be heavily involved with the digital platform. It's one thing to have acquired Sutton for Canada, but then I've got a significant amount of investment that's going to be made towards a digital platform for us, so that there were directly feeds from those municipal offices across the country. And I think we'll be one of those few firms that actually is embracing that and making sure that everybody at Sutton has access to that digital platform. And not just blockchain technology, there's all sorts of Web3 technologies that are out there that are evolving. And there's been hundreds of millions of dollars spent in the US on different technology and prop tech that we can actually acquire in Canada now for pennies on the dollar. So there's one of the things I'm spending a good chunk of my time right now is looking at all those different technologies, working with major data providers, both in Canada and the US, to make sure that we can get verified good data onto a transactional platform, and making sure that people are going to have access to the best information out there.
Very interesting.
Well, exciting time to be in the industry right now. I think you're going to change the not just Sutton Canada. I think you're going to push all your competitors to try and raise the bar to compete with you once you get going with all this. So exciting time. Congratulations to you too for being a Sutton broker owner and getting a new guy steering the ship and bringing the latest technology. It's
Yeah, we're very excited. We're very excited, and no, I love the brand, love the Sutton brand, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store.
Good. Well, I'm looking forward to working with you.
Awesome, Ross. Well, listen, welcome on board.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been episode 112 on the David and David on Real Estate podcast, and super delighted to have Ross McCredie from McCredie Investments with us, and I can't wait to work with Ross in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Thank you. Look forward to it.